In this video we're going to look at some of Small Basic's text methods that will allow us to manipulate what we call string data, such as this string of characters here. And we've already looked at least a couple of text methods. I think the get character is the first one that comes to mind, where we use it to create tabs and whatnot in our output. But there are others as well. And what I want to talk about here are methods that will allow us to split up a string or isolate certain substrings, meaning smaller parts of a larger string. For example, what if I wanted to write a letter to this guy, and the greeting would be, "Dear Mr. Lincoln." Okay, I only want part of the string, the Lincoln part. I don't care about the first name. I could hard code this exactly, "Dear Mr. Lincoln," but what if he is one of 5,000 names in a huge database or a file full of customer names, and I want to generate letters to everybody? I can't hard code Lincoln in there. So what I can do is manipulate the string so I can isolate the last name, whoever it is. I can, whatever the name is, I can isolate that last name and split up the name. Okay, what if I wanted to change the format of this name and make it like last name comma first name? Then I have to switch the stuff around. I have to isolate the first and last name. So that's what we'll do, and this is a short program. It's not very difficult. Alright, so what we do know is that the first name and last name are separated by a space. Alright, so we have to find the position of that space within the string, and once we find that, we have enough information to start splitting it up. So you can think of the space as like the cutting point. That's where we're going to cut the name. Now, what do I mean by the position of the space? Well, names or strings really are also indexed. They're kind of like arrays are indexed. Each element in the array has a number starting with number 1. Each character in a string also has a number. So in this case, the A is in the 1 position, the B in the 2, the R in the 3, and so on and so forth. So we need to figure out what index the space has, and there's a method that allows us to easily determine that. So why don't I create a variable called space position, and here's how we can find the space. We call upon our text object in Small Basic, and then we'll use the get index of method. Alright, now looking over here on the right, the get indexed of method requires 2 arguments. One is the text that we're looking at, in this case the name, so that'll be the first argument. And then the subtext is that character that we're interested in this case the space. So the text is the larger name that we're interested in, and the subtext is the space. Okay, so what this will do is it'll search the name for the space and give us the position of the space. Okay, and then once we have that, we know where to cut. So let's now that we have that, let's start cutting the name. Why don't we isolate the first name? We'll say first name equals, and then there's a method here that's called get subtext. Get subtext. Okay, subtext is a smaller piece of a larger piece of text. All right. So what kind of arguments do we require here? I'm on the right here. We have to provide the text that we're looking at. That'll be the name, just like before. We need to provide a starting position. If we're cutting a smaller part of this string, where do we start cutting? And in this case, we're starting at the beginning. To isolate the first name, we want to start with position number 1, with the A in Abraham in this case. And then the length is, alright, how long is this substring going to be, or how many characters do you want to take? And really, we want to take up to but not including the position of the space. And so we'll basically get to that point by providing the argument space position minus 1. If I just use space position, it would work just as well, but I would have this trailing space on the first name, which I really don't want or need. So let's do it. We'll provide the name. That's the text that we're dealing with here. The starting position is 1, we said. We're starting at the beginning of the string to isolate the first name. And how many characters are we going to take? Well, We're going up to the position of the space, but I don't want to include the space, so I'll do space position minus 1. All right? And that will give me the first name. All right, now the last name. We have text. Get subtext to end. That'll work well for the last name. Okay, so the get subtext to end has only 2 arguments. One is the text that we're dealing with, the name in this case, and then the start position. And then once we provide the start position, it just takes everything up to the end. So the start position in this case is right after the space. So it's going to be the space position plus 1. Okay, if I do just the space position, then I'm going to have a leading space on the last name, which I don't want. So let's do it. We'll use get subtext to end, and we're providing the name, and where are we starting? At the space position plus 1. Okay, so now the name has been successfully cut into 2 different strings, one for the first name, one for the last name. Let's just throw a few lines of output in here so we make sure it worked. Okay, how about your first name is and then, you know what, maybe we'll do the last comma first. Oh, we'll concatenate. How about a new variable? We'll call it last comma first. And we'll concatenate a comma and a space. And then the first name. Okay, we'll also throw that to the output window. Okay, so your first name is Abraham, your last name is Lincoln. We have the last comma first format, all right? And you may be thinking, great, why didn't you just, we could have written this program with that output on really the first week of class. Your first name is Abraham, your last name is Lincoln. Why didn't I hard code that? Well, I could have, but then it only works with that name. What if I want to use a different name in here? The way I have it, this will work for any name as long as we have the first name and then a space, and then the last name. So we'll throw in one more name in here. Okay, and you can see it works for any name the way we have it coded.